In the introduction, we propose that we seek to understand an object by inquiring into its essential substance, that is, the individual units constituting it, and its essential behavior, that is, the individual laws governing these individual units, which can also be thought of as the relationship between these units and their context. We then argued that positing an accurate ontology is the same as positing a theory of everything. We made the claim that there is contained in the Bible an accurate ontology, and therefore there is also discoverable in it a theory of everything, which is capable of accounting for all observable phenomena. But how can we have confidence that we are in fact unfolding a theory of everything, a TOE? Consider then that there's only one test that TOE must pass to qualify as a TOE, namely that a theory of everything must account for everything. But that's the problem. How do we know that we're in fact examining everything and not a pet province of it? As relates to the substance of being, let us allow in the first place that we observe finite objects, and that such finite objects are, the sum of which is logically finite, and let's call this sum x. We can grant then that being is finite. Now, the only way we can determine the finitude of an object is by determining its limits, its boundaries. And logically, such a boundary can only be defined as a transition between the region in which the object is and the region beyond it in which the object is not. Therefore, the limit of x is necessarily the boundary between x and not x. Even if not x is nothing, it must be for the limit of x to be defined. Consider then that being separated by this boundary, x and not x are discontinuous categories occupying different ontological regions. But then x and not x are contiguous at the boundary between the two, so that they are continuous at that point. We can resolve this by reasoning that x and not x have a minimum of two attributes each, one which they have in continuity with one another, and one in discontinuity with one another. In the simplest case then, x has two attributes, finitude and being. We can characterize x as finite being. We reason then that not x is either, in the first place, not finite or infinite being, so that in being it is continuous with x, and in being infinite it is discontinuous with it. The ontological landscape is therefore constituted by finite being and infinite being. But then x contributes nothing to the ontological landscape in the context of infinite being, since finitude is as good as nothing to infinity. Infinity minus x is the same as infinity minus 0. X over infinity is 0. Therefore, infinite being is all the being there is, and infinite being is the ontological landscape. As such, x is not. But then x is. We can solve this by granting that x has no being of its own. Its being is derived from not x, contained and defined by not x. That is, whereas not x as infinite being simply is, x exists, where to exist means to have one's being in a more primary ground. Secondly, not x is finite non-being, so that in being finite it is continuous with x, but in not being it is discontinuous with it. Now this formulation of not x is a contradiction, since it is that which is not. We can therefore also formulate it by the rule, given y is not equal to y, then minus y. We will return to a more detailed consideration of this rule later. For now, we grant that not x is also anti-being, and specifically anti-x, since it is finite. Now, from the foregoing observations, one feature of a theory of everything is that it must account for three ontological states. One, finite being, which is derived being. Secondly, infinite being, which is primary being. And thirdly, non-being, which is anti-being. And it must account for these three ontological states as one theory. Although there may arise from it three branches dealing with these three ontological states, yet it must reconcile them and yield them. In this way, a TOE will supply a description of the infinite and the not in terms of the finite and vice versa, and will in this way provide a way for interaction of the infinite and the not with the finite. Consider then that in X being contained in and defined by not X, a second feature of a theory of everything is that it will yield two cosmologies. One in which finite being is contained in and defined by infinite being, and another in which finite being is contained in and defined by nothing, as one theory. Again, there may arise from this theory of everything two branches dealing with these two cosmologies, yet the TOE must yield and reconcile them as one theory. Now, as relates to the behavior of being, let us allow secondly that we observe regularity in the behavior, that is the interactions of finite objects, so that we characterize this regularity as law, which we assume to be. Consider then that a law is a limit of behavior. Law is therefore a finite category. If then law is, there must be that which is beyond the realm of law, which contains and defines it. Applying the insights from the conclusions of the previous discussion, there will therefore be discoverable in being not only that which is lawful, but also that which is beyond the law, and that is therefore either, firstly, above the law, which we shall call super law, or secondly, contrary to the law, which we shall call lawlessness or anti-law. Therefore, a third feature of a theory of everything is that it must account for three legal states. First, law. Secondly, super law. And thirdly, lawlessness or anti-law. And it must do so as one theory. Again, in X being defined by not X, a fourth feature of a theory of everything is that it must account for two legal regimes within the legal state. One in which law is defined by infinite being as super law, and another in which law is defined by non-being or anti-being as lawlessness or anti-law. It is for this reason that for all the good that has arisen out of science or logic or philosophy, there is no hope of arriving at a theory of everything within such disciplines or any other discipline founded on the law of non-contradiction. Such disciplines can only take us as far down as the law of non-contradiction. But what we are seeking in a theory of everything is that on which the very law of non-contradiction is founded. For if we have an explanation for everything except the law of non-contradiction, on which our definition of everything is supposedly founded, we do not have a theory of everything, for we have a theory of everything except the law. And for such explanation, we must appeal to something other than and more foundational than the law of non-contradiction or any other law of logic or physics, for that matter.